My former spouse, who betrayed our trust and left us behind years ago, unexpectedly appeared at my doorstep with another man's child, seeking to rekindle our family. I firmly shut the door on her. To provide some background, my former spouse Lauren, 32, and I, 35, male, crossed paths in our mid-20s, specifically when I was about 24. Our paths crossed while we were both employed at the same company. Following a 2-year relationship, we tied the knot, and within 3 years of our marriage, we welcomed 2 daughters who are now 8 and 6 years old. The second pregnancy came as a surprise, and she felt discontent about it. However, she chose not to terminate it, despite my reassurance that I would support her decision if she did. I chose not to subject her to anything she wasn't comfortable with. Following the arrival of our first daughter, our bond remained strong, and our love for each other was as deep as ever. However, everything shifted following the second pregnancy. She grew increasingly temperamental and irritable, frequently targeting me or our eldest with her remarks. I came to the conclusion that this change was likely due to the hormones and other factors, so I endeavored to accept this new iteration of Lauren. We hoped that this situation would improve over time, but instead, it only deteriorated further, leading my daughter and me to navigate our interactions with extreme caution. I found myself managing all the responsibilities, despite the expectation that she would be the one at home. She chose to leave her job after our first child and managed all the household tasks while caring for our eldest as I focused on work until she became pregnant again. We decided to bring in a housekeeper during her pregnancy, as she expressed that she felt too fatigued to manage household tasks alongside caring for our children. I consented, despite it being a bit beyond our financial limits, since my earnings were insufficient at that moment. I decided to bring on a housekeeper, as I wanted to ensure Lauren's comfort, particularly during her pregnancy. I thought she would go back to taking care of the house and the kids during the day after our second daughter arrived. Furthermore, I want to clarify that I wasn't one of those husbands who neglected household responsibilities after returning home from work. I did everything in my power to assist, despite often feeling drained from my work. Once she welcomed our younger daughter into the world, I believed she would need a few months to recover, but then she would spring back, and we could return to our usual routine. Yet, as the months rolled by, she remained steadfast, showing no indication of transformation. She continued to be just as grumpy and difficult, showing no willingness to help with any chores around the house. She would simply remain at home throughout the day, engrossed in television. She hardly engaged with the kids at all, often opting to pay our neighbor to take them out to the park from time to time. I don't intend to come across as bitter, but I did feel that way due to my relentless efforts at work, both day and night. She wouldn't even put in the slightest effort at home. It was becoming increasingly costly for me to hire someone to handle all the cooking, cleaning, and various other household tasks. I needed to manage all the additional expenses, and I also aimed to set aside funds for our daughter's future. It was becoming increasingly difficult as Lauren was unwilling to offer any assistance. After nearly 6 months since our younger daughter was born, I realized we couldn't continue this way, and it was time for me to have a conversation with Lauren. Understanding the challenge that lay ahead, I requested my parents to take care of our daughters for a day, and they kindly agreed. On that day, I took a moment to sit down with Lauren and expressed my understanding of her exhaustion from 2 pregnancies. I gently conveyed my need for her support and collaboration in this situation. I conveyed to her that the cost of maintaining a housekeeper was becoming increasingly burdensome for us. I needed her to uphold her promise and take on at least some of the household chores, allowing us to discuss a reduction in the housekeeper's salary and ultimately save some money. She immediately rejected the idea, stating that she was too occupied with the kids to handle any household tasks. She insisted that I should focus on increasing my earnings rather than making excuses and placing blame on her for my financial situation. I attempted to convey to her that I was already giving my all, but it was essential for her to put in her best effort too if we aimed to make this marriage successful. I mentioned that she wasn't truly taking care of the kids. As far as I understood, she would simply allow them to join her in front of the television, and they would spend hours together as she indulged in her taste for tacky reality TV. This is something the housekeeper once casually shared with me. I quickly understood that mentioning it was a significant error, as she became defensive and claimed I was monitoring her via the housekeeper. Following that, she unleashed a passionate outburst directed at me, declaring that she could no longer tolerate the situation. She expressed her frustration about being pushed around and having to shoulder all the responsibilities while I merely occupied a desk for a few hours each day. She then expressed that it was my responsibility for not being able to afford a housekeeper and lamented that I had to plead for her assistance, given that I was meant to be the one in charge of the household. Everything about it was utterly nonsensical, and she was merely clutching at fleeting ideas to convince herself that there was nothing amiss with her inactivity throughout the day. And I was the unreasonable one for hoping she would genuinely participate and share the responsibilities at home. We found ourselves in a huge argument, and she labeled me a loser who couldn't possibly afford to be with someone like her. I responded by labeling her a lazy cow who had already fallen short as a mother, considering how frightened our eldest daughter was of her. And now she was also failing in her role as a wife. That comment struck a nerve, and she pushed me with considerable force. I stumbled and fell backward onto the coffee table with a loud crash, shattering the glass and injuring myself in the process. I was taken to the ER in a hurry, and she continuously expressed her apologies and wept the entire time. Fortunately, it was merely my back that sustained injuries, and they were only superficial. However, I could have been seriously harmed, and my trust in Lauren was shattered. I explained to her that she needed to find a new place to live because I couldn't have her around the kids. There was always a risk that she might lose her temper and unintentionally cause harm. I informed my parents to look after our daughters until Lauren arrived, and for an entire week, she voiced her objections, insisting she would never allow this to occur again. However, my trust in her had waned significantly. I nearly initiated divorce proceedings, but she pleaded for another opportunity. By the week's end, we reached an agreement. She would move in with her parents for a while and seek therapy. Only after a medical professional provided her with a clean bill of health would I permit her to return to our home. Clearly, something was amiss with her, as joyful individuals don't behave in such a manner. However, she was determined to address it and improve herself. I didn't want my daughters to grow up without their mother, so I decided to hold off on divorce and give our marriage another chance. We sought marriage counseling during our time apart, but ultimately it proved to be in vain as she chose to betray my trust. My parents moved in to assist with my daughters, while Lauren stayed with her parents. We attended weekly marriage counseling sessions, and for a time, it felt like things were improving. I also communicated with her therapist, who informed me that she had been experiencing postpartum depression, but she was showing signs of improvement. One of her symptoms had manifested as intense anger issues, a stark contrast to her previous demeanor. However, things escalated significantly when she pushed me, serving as a crucial moment of realization for both of us. This continued for nearly a year, and at about the 6-month point, I even permitted her to see our daughters while I supervised. She was gradually returning to her former self, and I felt a sense of relief witnessing that transformation. It truly seemed as though our circumstances were getting better, and we might genuinely find a way to make it succeed. Suddenly, she ceased attending our counseling sessions, leaving us without any explanation. She ceased her responses, yet I was aware of her progress as her therapist provided me with updates. It was perplexing, and for weeks I attempted to engage her in conversation, but she consistently dismissed me, insisting she needed some time alone. After nearly 3 months of her keeping her distance, I made the decision to visit her at her parents' home. I hadn't taken that step before because her parents disapproved of me and held me responsible, convinced that I was the one who had driven their daughter to behave in such a way. She mentioned that it would be best for me not to visit her while she was living with them, as it would only create unnecessary drama, and that was certainly the last thing we needed. However, I disregarded that guideline and went to see them regardless, as she had been behaving aloof and skipping counseling sessions. Even during her rare appearances, she appeared disinterested, leaving me puzzled and unable to understand her behavior. Whenever I attempted to communicate with her face-to-face, over the phone, or through text, she would assure me that everything was perfectly fine. Yet, I could discern from her actions that there was undoubtedly something she was concealing from me. When I arrived at her parents' house, I anticipated finding her there, but she was absent. When I inquired about her whereabouts, her parents informed me that they were prohibited from disclosing that information and abruptly closed the door in my face. I sensed their enjoyment, which filled me with unease, prompting me to call Lauren as I stood before her parents' house. I attempted to reach her multiple times, but she remained unresponsive, and my anxiety escalated with each passing moment. Consequently, I resolved to stealthily navigate around the house and find a way in on my own. I made my way to the backyard, aware that her parents typically left the kitchen door ajar. However, I soon realized I didn't need to venture that far, as I caught sight of Lauren perched on the swing her parents had in their yard. The unfortunate reality was that she had her back turned to me, engrossed in a moment with a man I didn't know. It's been ages since I last encountered them, yet the memory is etched in my mind. It was the most dreadful moment of my existence, and even now, it lingers in my memory. The moment he noticed me, the guy she was kissing pulled away, and by the time Lauren glanced back, I was already on my way to my car. She reached me and attempted to halt my progress, but I was too stunned to absorb her words. She attempted to reach for me, but I brushed her off and firmly instructed her not to make contact. Respecting my words, she refrained, and I returned to my car, setting off on my journey back home. I cut off all communication as soon as I arrived home, ensuring she wouldn't have the opportunity to provide any explanations. I also informed my parents that I needed them to seek legal counsel for me and to update them on what I had just experienced during my visit to Lauren's parents' house. I neither saw her nor heard from her until the moment we were required to meet with the court-appointed mediator regarding our divorce settlement. At that stage, I had essentially become a machine, operating solely for the benefit of my daughters, while my emotions had entirely gone dormant. There was a profound emptiness within me when I learned that Lauren was relinquishing her parental rights, as it was clear she had resolutely decided to part ways with us. She expressed her desire to be with the guy, whom I'll refer to as Jake, the one I spotted her with recently. He had been her childhood companion, and though life had taken them in different directions after high school, fate brought them back together when she returned to her parents' home. It seemed that during this reunion, her feelings for him had blossomed into something deeper. Her parents were on board with this, which likely explains why they had been correct about her kissing him in their backyard, even though she was a married woman with 2 children. It seems they had always envisioned her with Jake, and now they were pleased that Lauren was finally prioritizing her own happiness, as if she had ever been anything but capable of that. The divorce dragged on for what felt like an eternity, as she, despite her infidelity, was determined to secure alimony. After considerable effort, my attorney and I diligently worked to ensure that she received nothing in the divorce, as everything was justly mine. I had been the one covering all expenses for an extended period, while she simply spent her time watching television at home. 5 years have passed since the divorce was finalized, and we achieved our objective of ensuring she left with nothing. The months I spent navigating the divorce were among the most challenging of my life. Yet I understood that I had to remain strong for my daughter, as she relied solely on me. I am incredibly grateful for my parents' unwavering support and assistance. Their presence has been invaluable as I navigate the challenges of balancing work and caring for my children. 5 years have passed, and while the divorce felt like the most devastating event at the time, I find myself grateful for it now. I believe I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't made the choice to part ways with Lauren. Life has truly been kind to me since that time, and I find myself in a significantly improved situation now in every way. We have since relocated to a larger home because my income has improved, allowing me to focus my spending solely on myself and my daughters. My parents are nearby and visit occasionally. I am surrounded by friends who care deeply for me, and my daughters are filled with joy. That's everything a person requires, and I feel immense gratitude to the universe for the way things are unfolding for me now. That was the case until Lauren reappeared a few days ago. The children had already left for school, and I was on the verge of heading to work when I opened the door. At that moment, the doorbell chimed, revealing Lauren standing there with a boy next to her. The child appeared to be no more than 3 or 4 years old, and I was certain that he must be Lauren's son. Her unexpected presence outside my door caught me off guard, and as I struggled to comprehend the situation, she began to cry and expressed her desire to apologize and mend our relationship. She expressed that she was finally prepared to reunite as a family and offer our marriage another opportunity. It was hard to fathom that she'd returned after all this time, and now she was suggesting we try to rekindle our marriage, as if the choice rested solely in her hands. In an instant, I resolved to close the door and send her away, as I had no desire to engage in whatever this might be. However, prior to that, I expressed to her that this was no longer her family. I ceased to be her husband the moment she betrayed me with Jake. The divorce was merely a formality. She had relinquished custody of her daughter, and now she could no longer call us her family. Once I expressed my feelings, I closed the door firmly and instructed her to leave, as I preferred to keep her away from my property. I felt a surge of anger and could have easily let loose on her, but I held back for the sake of the little boy. After I closed the door, her cries echoed in the hallway for a few minutes, but I chose to disregard them. Once I confirmed that everything was quiet, I headed off to work. I made a strong effort to avoid dwelling on it, as that would only undermine my determination, and I simply couldn't allow that to occur. I nearly managed to erase the memory of Lauren's visit to my home. However, the moment I returned home from work, I got a call from my parents insisting on an explanation for why I had rejected her. They informed me that Lauren reached out to them following my rejection, and she was left heartbroken. My parents mentioned that they were the ones who provided her with my new address and encouraged her to come see me, as she was going through a divorce from Jake and finally had an opportunity to mend our relationship. I was informed that Lauren had contacted them about a month prior, and this had been developing for quite a while. My parents felt it was the right moment for me to consider my children, as my daughters required a mother, and there was no one better suited for that role than Lauren. They concluded that she warranted another opportunity and informed her of my whereabouts and the words she should convey to me. I felt a surge of anger towards them for taking it upon themselves to forgive her, deciding to give her another chance without even considering my feelings on the matter. It might have turned out quite poorly if the children had been at home, and it was truly irresponsible of them to engage in such behavior. I confronted them, but they wouldn't admit to any wrongdoing, citing their support during my divorce and their care for the kids as justification. Even now, from time to time, they take care of the kids, and they think that the decision to reconcile with Lauren rests solely with me. However, they possess the same authority to determine what was in the best interest of the children, and I couldn't strip that away from them. I found it absurd that they thought otherwise, as ultimately they were my daughters, not theirs. Although I held them in high regard and remained grateful for their support during my divorce, I believe it was not their role to reintroduce Lauren into my life. We had a disagreement, and they insisted that I was the one in the wrong, claiming I was being selfish for not allowing Lauren another opportunity. They assured me they had thoroughly considered everything and believed she had changed, deserving a place in my daughters' lives, despite my reminders that she had relinquished her rights. It was deemed offensive that I thought they would jeopardize my daughters or me, and they claimed I was damaging their lives by being too proud to recognize their need for their mother. It's been several days, and I truly believe I acted reasonably and with consideration, as I've reflected on this extensively. Am I wrong for not allowing my ex-wife another opportunity to be a mother? It has been approximately a week since Lauren appeared at my doorstep with her son, and I have recently uncovered the reality of her connection with my parents. It's truly unsettling, and I find myself at a loss for words, grappling with my own thoughts as I try to make sense of it all. It's astonishing how each of them has turned their back on me without a moment's hesitation. It seems they were not only the ones who revealed my new address to her, but they had also maintained contact with her throughout. After the divorce, I severed ties with her, but they held on to the hope that she would eventually return. Conversations were sparse, occurring perhaps just once a month. Yet, that was sufficient for me to sense a deep betrayal. Jake had coerced Lauren into relinquishing her rights after she was effectively traded alongside the divorce papers. He presented her with a stark choice. She could either forsake her family to build a new life with him, or maintain contact with her children and battle for custody, which would inevitably mean leaving him behind. My parents said it was a tough decision for her to arrive at. However, she chose to be with Jake, creating a new family with him rather than remaining with the one she already had. My parents mentioned that Lauren reached out to them soon after I filed for divorce, sharing her situation and seeking their assistance, as she wished to maintain private contact with her children. She expressed that she felt trapped by both of us, and regardless of the outcome, she wouldn't have the chance to see her children. As I battled for full custody with supervised visitation rights, Jake had urged her to completely forsake her children. Even if she chose to contest custody and oppose Jake, the likelihood of her securing partial custody was minimal, considering the context of our divorce and her past struggles with temper management. Thus, pursuing custody appeared to be an unproductive use of her time and resources. She faced a genuine possibility of losing both Jake and custody of our daughters in the end, should she choose to engage in a battle. That's when my parents stepped in. She met with them privately and nearly pleaded for their support in maintaining contact with her daughters, asking them to serve as the link between them. She understood that once she relinquished her rights, there would be no possibility of visiting, much less any form of supervision. However, my parents would, and they intended to take advantage of that. They managed to pull it off and deceived me for a long time by secretly arranging for Lauren to meet our daughters. They acted because Lauren's situation resonated deeply with them, and they understood that they could not, with a clear conscience, separate a mother from her children. For years, they betrayed their own son without a hint of remorse. They mentioned that each time I dropped our kids off at their place, they would invite Lauren over to enjoy some time with them. My children never revealed that they were seeing their mother, as my parents would entice them with toys and sweets to ensure their silence on the matter. Whenever I inquired about their time at their grandparents' house, my daughters would share that they engaged in games with my parents and their friend. I had always thought they were referring to my parents' real friends, the ones I was already familiar with. However, it turns out that my parents had instructed my daughters to call me that if I inquired about their day. I was taken aback to discover that my daughters had been untruthful, yet I chose to forgive them, understanding that they are merely children. Additionally, Lauren and my parents had effectively coerced and pressured them into silence. Upon discovering the truth from my parents, I confronted my daughters about whether they had been seeing their mother in secret. They broke down in tears, expressing that they felt they couldn't share this with me for fear of divine retribution. It seems that Lauren and my parents must have instilled a strong sense of fear regarding the truth, which explains their persistent secrecy and ambiguity throughout this entire ordeal. I felt a deep sense of regret for not inquiring about the friends my daughters were spending time with, as it could have just as easily been someone else in their lives, a presence more perilous than Lauren, and I would have remained oblivious. However, I will be putting a stop to it now, as I am obtaining a restraining order against all of them. I possess written evidence of this, as my parents emailed me to reveal the truth just a few days following our disagreement. They thought the email would help me understand just how desperate Lauren was to hold on to her role as a mother to her daughters, all while trying to keep the supposed love of her life intact. And that would somehow lead me to forgive everyone involved. But all it did was make me see that everyone here was a deceitful little liar, and I couldn't trust anyone anymore. It's quite ironic that Lauren relinquished her parental rights and now has to meet our kids in secret as if it were some sort of offense. It all stemmed from Jake's desire to keep her away from her former family. He was meant to be her one true love, yet now they were facing divorce, rendering everything they shared meaningless. They even had a son together, but my parents say that Jake wanted nothing to do with her or his child now, as he had received a job offer and was planning to move away in a couple of months. Lauren had recently resumed her job, and their son had just begun kindergarten in this area. This made her reluctant to relocate with him, which had been the source of their prolonged arguments. 3 months ago, everything reached a breaking point when Jake declared that he was finished and accepted that job, preparing to move out. He had lost all interest in the idea of being a family man, as it was evident that it would require him to forfeit his own future and happiness solely for her contentment, and he wasn't prepared to make that sacrifice. This was intended to evoke sympathy for Lauren, but instead, it only reinforced my belief that justice had finally been achieved. I have already consulted with my attorney, and the petition for the restraining orders has been submitted. My daughters and I have engaged in a thorough conversation about everything, and I have made it clear to them that from now on, they will not be seeing their grandparents or their mother again. They appear to be fine with the situation for the time being, but we will continue attending therapy to address our issues. I believe this has been a challenging experience for them, likely for the past 5 years. However, this all comes to a close now. Update 2. Hello everyone. I truly appreciate all the care and encouragement shown here. I truly appreciate all the wonderful messages and blessings that have been sent to my daughters. My parents and Lauren have received restraining orders and are scheduled to appear in court shortly. I have no idea what their feelings are regarding this situation, as I have cut off all communication with them on every platform and instructed my friends to avoid any interaction in case they reach out. I have also enhanced the security around my house and have been working from home for a couple of days. I communicated with my daughter's school authorities and informed them about the situation as well. At first, I had no plans to let them attend school for a few days, but I was concerned about their education being affected due to Angel and my parents. Now, educators are expected to monitor them closely and ensure that no one other than myself is allowed to collect them after school. I am taking every possible measure to ensure that they cannot reach us, as I am certain they will attempt to do so. So far, things have been positive, and I'm optimistic that once we obtain that restraining order, they will continue to keep their distance. Update 3 high. This will be a brief update. We successfully obtained the restraining order, and for the next 5 years, all 3 of those individuals will be required to maintain their distance from me and my daughters. Clearly, they must avoid dire repercussions. I'm maintaining all the security measures I implemented for the time being, as the last time I encountered them, they appeared quite angry, and I prefer to avoid any potential risks. My daughters and I are participating in ongoing family counseling sessions, and I believe we will see significant progress in the next few months. Significant strides have already been achieved, Truly, my sole desire at this moment is for my daughters to find happiness, and nothing else matters. Your kind wishes are truly appreciated. We rely on them more than you know.